Martha sat on the edge of her bed, her hands clasped around a steaming cup of tea. Her best friend, Clara, had just left after another animated conversation about relationships. As usual, Clara had delivered one of her cryptic nuggets of wisdom. No man is perfect. Just choose your demon and keep pouring anointing oil on him. At first, Martha had laughed, dismissing it as one of Clara's quirky remarks. But now, sitting in the quiet of her room, she found herself pondering those words. Was love really about finding someone whose flaws you could tolerate, and then loving them through the chaos? Martha's thoughts wandered to Simon, her boyfriend of 3 years. Simon, with his crooked grin and endless optimism, had been her rock during tough times. Martha often joked that if Simon's memory were a garden, it would be filled with weeds of sports trivia, and no flowers of sentiment. She thought about the early days of their relationship. Back then, Simon's flaws had seemed endearing. His forgetfulness was a small price to pay for the way he made her laugh until her sides hurt. But over time, the quirks had grown into irritations. She'd often find herself silently stewing when he missed another anniversary or zoned out during conversations to check match scores. Martha took a sip of her tea and sighed. She wasn't perfect either. She had her moments of impatience, her tendency to overthink, and her inexplicable need to reorganize the kitchen every few months. Yet Simon never made her feel less than cherished. He'd joke about her quirks, but always with a twinkle in his eye, and a reassuring, "That's why I love you, babe." Clara's words echoed in her mind. Just choose your demon. Martha realized that Simon wasn't the problem. It was her own expectation of perfection, her silent wish that Simon would change to fit an ideal. But perfection didn't exist, not in Simon, not in her, and certainly not in their relationship. The next day, Martha decided to test Clara's theory. She joined Simon on the couch as he watched a football game. At first, she felt out of place, fidgeting with her phone and trying to make sense of the players' movements. But as the game progressed, she began to see why Simon loved it. His enthusiasm was infectious. He cheered, groaned, and leapt off the couch like a kid. By the time the game ended, Martha found herself smiling. Simon turned to her, surprised. "You stayed for the whole game," he said, his voice a mix of amazement and gratitude. "I figured it was time I understood your world," she replied with a shrug. "Besides, it wasn't that bad." Simon grinned and pulled her into a hug. "You're the best, you know that." Martha laughed. "I try." That evening, as they cooked dinner together, Simon surprised her. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a card with a simple message. "Thank you for always being patient with me." Tears welled up in Martha's eyes. Simon wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And wasn't that what love was about? Choosing someone, flaws and all, and working together to grow. From that day on, Martha began to focus less on Simon's flaws, and more on the love they shared. She learned to pour her anointing oil in the form of patience, understanding, and humor. In turn, Simon made efforts to remember important dates and spend more quality time with her. Years later, as they sat together watching a football game, Martha thought about Clara's words again. She smiled, realizing how true they were. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing the imperfections you could live with and nurturing the beauty of the bond you shared. And so, Martha kept pouring her anointing oil, not to fix Simon, but to celebrate the perfectly imperfect love they had built together.
The end. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe.